Kim Tae-hyung stands by the large window in his living room. Outside, the city is gray. He sees nothing good in it. Today is his birthday. Tae-hyung is the head of the Chongsang Mafia group. He's young, but everyone fears him. He has power and money. His penthouse is like a fortress, with bulletproof glass, cameras, and guards. But today, none of that matters. Tae-hyung hates his birthday. It reminds him of bad things, of betrayal, of the loss of loved ones. Every year on this day, he feels lonely. It's quiet in his luxurious apartment, very quiet. His subordinates know not to disturb the boss on this day. No one calls, no one comes. He is completely alone. Tae-hyung looks at his phone. The screen is black. No one is texting. He feels a heavy emptiness inside. He's the head of the mafia, but right now he's just an unhappy man. He turns away from the window and paces the room. He needs something to do. Maybe work will help him forget about today. But even the thought of work doesn't improve his mood. One street away from the penthouse park, So-yoon lives in an ordinary house near Tae-hyung. She's a designer and works from home. Her apartment is small, but very cozy. Today is her birthday, too. She wakes up early and bakes a chocolate cake. Then she cleans the entire apartment and decorates it with colorful garlands. She puts on her most beautiful dress and waits. So-yoon waits for someone to call or text. She hopes her friends will remember her. She looks at her phone. An hour passes, then another. The phone remains silent. She approaches the cake and adjusts the candles. Her hands tremble slightly. She tries to convince herself that it's still too early, that her friends are simply sleeping. But inside, anxiety is growing. She turns on music to fill the silence, but the cheerful songs only emphasize her loneliness. She turns off the music and sits down on the sofa. Her shoulders slump. She looks at the garlands. They seem stupid and unnecessary to her now. No one will come to see them. She feels tears welling up in her eyes. She thinks, does no one care about me? Has everyone forgotten me? 2 people, 2 birthdays. Just one street separates them, one in his luxurious fortress, the other in her small apartment. But both feel the same thing, a heavy, oppressive loneliness. They don't yet know that their lives will soon intersect in the most unexpected way. Ji-won wakes up to the abrupt sound of her alarm. She struggles to open her eyes. Her head feels heavy, and there's a bad taste in her mouth. She spent the night with a new guy, and now she's having trouble getting out of bed. She turns off the alarm on her phone. Then her gaze falls on the date. The numbers glow brightly on the screen. Ji-won's heart skips a beat, then starts beating wildly. She's completely sobered up. So-yoon's birthday today. She's panicking. She always remembered her best friend's birthday. They've been friends since childhood. Every year they celebrated it together. But this year, everything went wrong. A new guy, new feelings, new experiences. She simply forgot. A feeling of guilt overwhelms her. She imagines So-yoon, her kind and slightly shy friend. So-yoon, who always supported her in difficult times. So-yoon, who is probably now sitting alone in her apartment, waiting for someone to remember her. I'm a terrible friend, Ji-won thinks. She quickly gets out of bed and starts getting dressed. She needs to do something urgently. She needs to fix this. Simply coming and apologizing isn't enough. She knows how much So-yoon has been looking forward to this day. She needs to do something big, something that will show how much she values their friendship. And then it dawns on her. An idea. Surprise, she says to herself. I'll give her a real surprise. She imagines So-yoon's face when she opens the door and sees her with gifts, balloons, and a cake. Her eyes will widen in surprise, then sparkle with joy. It will be the perfect way to make amends. Ji-won feels a surge of energy. She quickly showers, gets dressed, and runs out of the house. She has a plan, and now she needs to execute it. Her first stop is a party supply store. She steps inside and is surrounded by a riot of color. Balloons, garlands, and firecrackers are everywhere. I want the best for my best friend, she thinks. She chooses the most beautiful gold and silver balloons. Then she grabs a pack of brightly colored party poppers. She even buys a funny party garland that says, Happy Birthday! So-yoon will like this, she smiles. Next stop is a pastry shop. She orders the most beautiful cake in the display case. It's pink, with white icing and beautiful flowers. It's exactly the kind of cake Seo-yoon likes. She'll be thrilled, Ji-won thinks, as the pastry chef packs the cake into a large box. Now she has everything. She loads her groceries into the car. The interior fills with balloons. She puts the cake in the back seat. She's in a hurry. She wants to make it before evening so she can catch Seo-yoon at home. Seo-yoon's address. She's been there hundreds of times, but today, in her rush, she doesn't want to rely on memory. The navigator displays the route. Ji-won glances at the screen. She sees a familiar street name and house number. Everything seems correct. She pulls out onto the road. Rush hour has begun outside. Cars move slowly. Ji-won is nervous. She keeps checking her watch. If only I could make it. If only I could make it, she repeats to herself. She imagines Seo-yoon probably upset by now, maybe even crying. The thought makes her press harder on the gas. There's a traffic jam ahead. Ji-won taps her fingers on the steering wheel. She's impatient. She decides to turn onto another street to avoid the congestion. She remembers that she can drive through the next block. She turns, and a few minutes later finds herself on a quiet street similar to the one where Seo-yoon lives. The houses here look almost identical. At the GPS again, she sees that her blue dot is almost at her destination. She pulls up to a house that seems right to her. Great, I'm here! She gets out of the car. She needs to carry all her groceries in one go. She hangs the garland around her neck, takes the cake box in one hand and a bunch of balloons and a bag of party poppers in the other. She's a little sad, but she's happy. She imagines her friend's happy face, and it gives her strength. She approaches the entrance. The door is locked. She sets the cake down to dial the intercom code. She remembers the code Seo-yoon told her. But in her head, haste and excitement made the numbers a little jumbled. She entered a code that looked like the right one, but it was for an entrance on a neighboring street she'd visited long ago. The door opens with a click. Yes! She rejoices and goes inside. She takes the elevator up to the desired floor. Her heart beats with anticipation. She steps out of the elevator and approaches the apartment door. She adjusts the garland around her neck and picks up the cake and balloons. She takes a deep breath and presses the doorbell. She prepares to shout, "Happy birthday!" and sees Seo-yoon's happy face. Taehyung sits in his office. He tries to read reports, but he can't concentrate. It's his birthday, and this heavy feeling doesn't leave him. He puts the papers aside. The silence in the penthouse seems deafening. Suddenly, his thoughts are interrupted by the sharp sound of the doorbell. Taehyung slowly raises his head. His face tightens. No one should disturb him. Everyone knows that rule. He hears the quick footsteps of his guards outside the door. Then the voice of his right-hand man, his old boss Pak. "Who's there?" There's no answer. The bell rings again, even more insistently. Taehyung feels a slight irritation. This doesn't seem like a typical visit from a subordinate. This is something else. Perhaps a problem, perhaps a provocation. He stands up, his movements slow and deliberate. He decides to handle this himself. He needs to let off some steam, and this insolent visitor could be a good opportunity. He approaches the front door. His guard stands still, waiting. Old Pak quietly says, "Boss, let us..." Taehyung silently raises his hand, cutting him off. He doesn't take his eyes off the door. He grabs the handle and yanks it open. What he sees makes him freeze in place. A smiling girl stands before him. She's wearing brightly colored clothes, and a garland with the words, "Happy Birthday," dangles from her neck. In one hand, she holds a huge pink unicorn cake. In the other, she holds a bunch of colorful balloons. Party poppers are sticking out of her jacket pocket. She takes a deep breath, preparing to shout something. "Ji-won." She's full of joyful anticipation. She imagines how happy her friend Seo-yoon will be. She smiles broadly and starts shouting loudly, "Happy birthday!" But her voice breaks. Her smile disappears. It's not Seo-yoon standing before her. It's a tall, scowling man in an expensive suit. His face is cold and angry. His eyes stare at her with such anger that it takes her breath away. He looks very dangerous. He exudes a sense of power and authority. Ji-won feels her heart begin to beat wildly. She doesn't understand what's happening. "Where is Seo-yoon?" Who is this man? Taehyung watches this scene with disbelief. His first impulse is anger. Pink cake? Unicorn? Balloons? Is this some kind of mockery? Have his enemies discovered his weakness, found out he hates his birthday, and decided to launch this kind of psychological attack on him? His face hardens even more. His fingers clench into fists. He feels anger filling him. This is the most subtle way to insult him. Who are you? His voice is quiet, but there is a threat in it. Wan can't speak. She's too scared. She just shakes her head, her eyes wide with fear. Who sent you? Taehyung steps forward. What kind of show is this? Jiwon steps back, her hands shaking. She's afraid she'll drop the cake. I have the wrong address, she finally blurts out. Her voice trembles. I was looking for my friend, Seoyun, Park Seoyun. Taehyung looks at her suspiciously. He doesn't believe her. This story is too ridiculous. He turns to Boss Park. Check her out, he says curtly. Old Park approaches Jiwon cautiously. He sees her genuine fear. He speaks to her calmly. Show me your phone, he asks. Call history, messages. Jiwon, still shaking, hands him her phone. She feels tears welling up in her eyes. She just wanted to surprise her friend. How did things go so wrong? Old Park quickly scrolls through her phone. He sees numerous missed calls to Soyun. He sees messages on Messenger with apologies and the words, I'm on my way! Surprise! He sees photos of two smiling girls, Jiwon and another dark-skinned woman with kind eyes. He shows the phone to Taehyung. Boss, he says quietly, I think it's true. She got the address wrong. Her friend lives on the next street. Taehyung looks at the photo, smiling Seoyun. He reads Jiwon's messages. Sorry, I forgot. I want to fix everything. He sees the GPS history with the wrong address. His anger slowly begins to subside. He looks at the frightened Jiwon, standing before him, is in tears. He looks at the balloons and the cake. And he understands. It wasn't an attack. It was a mistake. A stupid, absurd, but accidental mistake. Old Park finds Seoyun's profile on social media and shows it to Taehyung. Taehyung reads Seoyun's latest post, which was published a few hours ago. It's my birthday, she wrote. I baked a cake and I'm waiting, but it seems everyone has forgotten about me. The phone is silent. No one comes. I feel so lonely and unwanted. Maybe I should just go to bed so this day will be over soon? Placed a sad smiley face next to the text. Taehyung looks at Seoyun's photo. She's smiling in her old profile picture, but her last words are filled with sadness. He sees in her eyes the same loneliness he feels himself. His anger completely disappears. Now he feels something different, a strange feeling of guilt. Because of the mistake with his address, this girl is now suffering. She sits alone and cries, thinking that no one cares about her. He looks at Jiwon. She's still crying, but now more out of relief that she's finally understood. I just wanted to make her happy, Jiwon says quietly, wiping away tears. I forgot her birthday because of my new boyfriend. I wanted to make things right, and now she's out there alone, thinking everyone abandoned her. Taehyung listens silently. He understands her feelings. He knows what it's like to feel guilty and alone. Taehyung turns away and looks out the window. He sees the city lights. Somewhere out there, very close, sits a girl who feels as lonely as he does, and he has unwittingly become the cause of her tears. He is a man of action. He cannot simply stand aside. He makes a decision. He turns to Boss Pack, his face becoming determined again. This error occurred because of our address, he says firmly, so we must correct it. Old Pak looks at him in surprise. Boss? We will dry her tears, Taehyung continues. Since our house is the cause of her unhappiness, our house must fix it. He points to all the party props, cake, balloons, party poppers. Let's take all this, he orders, and go to the right address. Jiwon stares at him, her eyes wide. She doesn't understand what's happening. This dangerous, angry man now wants to help her? Are you serious? She asks quietly. Taehyung looks at her. His gaze is no longer so cold. "You wanted to surprise your friend," he says. "Now you have help." He turns to his people. "The car," he commands. "And make sure all this is carefully loaded. We're on our way." His guards begin to move. They carefully take the cake and balloons from Ji-won. They collect all the party poppers and garlands. Ji-won still can't believe what's happening. She looks at Tae-hyung, who is now giving orders to his men. He looks like a completely different person, not so angry and dangerous. She feels a glimmer of hope. Maybe things can still be fixed. Maybe Seo-yoon's birthday won't be completely ruined. Tae-hyung puts on his coat. His thoughts are clear. He doesn't know why he's doing this. Maybe it's out of a sense of responsibility. Maybe it's because he saw his own feelings reflected in this situation. But he knows he has to do it. He looks at Ji-won. "Lead the way," he says curtly. "Show me the way to your friend." And they leave the penthouse to right the wrong and maybe bring someone a little happiness that day. Seo-yoon sits at the table, looking at her chocolate cake. The candles are gone. She blew them out a few minutes ago in complete silence, making a single wish. For this day to end soon, she sits alone. The garlands on the wall now seem like a mockery to her. The bright colors only emphasize the grayness and emptiness in her soul. She picks up her phone again. The screen is black. No new messages, no missed calls. Nothing. She puts the phone down on the table and covers her face with her hands. Silent tears slowly flow down her cheeks. She tries to hold them back, but she can't. Loneliness squeezes her heart like a heavy, cold lump. "Nobody needs me," she whispers into the empty room. "Nobody at all." She thinks about Ji-won, her best friend. They always celebrated birthdays together. But this year, even she forgot. That thought hurts her the most. She gets up and goes to the window. It's dark outside. The city lives its own life, and no one knows she exists. No one knows it's her birthday, and she's completely alone. She decides she's had enough. She can't sit around and wait any longer when no one will come. She's tired of hope that only causes pain. She slowly removes the garlands from the wall and carefully places them in a box. Then she covers the cake with plastic wrap and puts it in the refrigerator. Her movements are slow, devoid of energy. She turns off the light in the living room and goes to the bathroom to wash her face. The cold water on her face mixes with tears. She looks at her reflection in the mirror. Tear-stained eyes, a sad face. "That's enough," she tells herself. "I just need to go to bed. Tomorrow will be a new day, and all this will be over." She changes into her pajamas and goes to bed. She hopes sleep will bring her oblivion. She closes her eyes and tries not to think about anything, but sadness and loneliness do not leave her. She lies in the darkness and listens to the silence in her apartment. The silence she had longed for and which now seems unbearable. Suddenly, the silence is broken by a loud, insistent ringing of the doorbell. Seo-yoon's eyes snap open. Her heart skips a beat, then starts pounding. Who is this? It's too late now. My first thought, maybe it's a neighbor who's had another emergency, or the postman with an unexpected package. The bell rings again, more insistently. She slowly gets out of bed. She no longer has the strength to put on a dress. She throws an old, stretched-out cardigan over her pajamas and wipes the remaining tears from her face. "I'm coming! I'm coming!" she shouts towards the door. She approaches the door and looks through the peephole. What she sees makes her recoil in surprise. Ji-won stands outside the door. Her face is pale, her eyes are red from crying, and the same happy birthday garland is still hanging around her neck. But that's not the strangest thing. A strange man stands next to her, very tall, very serious, and incredibly handsome. He's wearing a perfectly tailored, expensive suit, and in his hands is the very same pink unicorn cake Ji-won showed her in the photo at the store. But that's not all. Behind the man, in the dimly lit hallway, stand several more people. They too are wearing formal suits, and they're holding bundles of colorful balloons that look utterly incongruous in their stern hands. The scene seems so surreal that for a moment Seo-yoon thinks she's still dreaming. She slowly, distrustfully opens the door. The awkward silence stretches. Ji-won realizes she needs to do something to defuse the situation. She decides to take action. "Happy birthday!" She suddenly shouts and pulls the string of the party popper, which she managed to get out of her pocket. There's a loud pop, and a cloud of multicolored confetti flies into the air. It slowly settles on Taehyung's shoulders and the hallway floor. The guards behind Taehyung instinctively flinch and take a step forward, their hands flying to their hidden weapons. Their faces express extreme tension and confusion. Taehyung turns his head and takes one look at them. Instantly, they freeze in place, their hands dropping to their sides. They step back, but their postures still suggest readiness for action. So-yoon watches this silent scene, her confusion growing. Who are these people? Why are they acting like this? And why does this serious man with the cake seem like their leader? Ji-won, oblivious to what is happening, begins to inflate one of the balloons that one of the guards gave her. "Come in, everyone, come in," she says, trying to sound cheerful. "We won't be celebrating here in the hallway." She pushes past Taehyung into the apartment, dragging a few balloons behind her. Now Taehyung and So-yoon are left alone in the doorway. He's still holding the cake. She's still standing there, hesitant. He looks at her. He sees the question in her eyes. He sees the remnants of sadness and the dawning curiosity. "It seems we've interrupted your vacation," he says, glancing at her pajamas. So-yoon adjusts her cardigan sheepishly. I wasn't expecting guests anymore," she quietly admits. Her words hurt him. He understands them too well. "Sometimes the most unexpected guests bring the most interesting surprises," he says. It doesn't sound like him. He doesn't say things like that. But today is clearly throwing him off his usual treadmill. He makes up his mind. He steps through the threshold of her apartment. His large, powerful figure seems even more massive in her small, cozy living room. He carries this pink cake like the most precious and most ridiculous trophy of his life. His guards remain in the corridor. They line the wall, creating a surreal scene. Stern men in dark suits, motionless as statues, holding colorful balloons. Ji-won is already inside. She quickly finds a vase and places several inflated balloons in it. She tries to turn on the music, but her fingers are shaking. "So-yoon, I'm so sorry," she says, finally addressing her friend. "I ruined everything. I forgot about your birthday because of that stupid date, and then I decided to surprise you, but I got the wrong address on the GPS and ended up at... She falls silent, looking at Taehyung, not knowing how to introduce him. Taehyung places the cake on the table next to So-yoon's chocolate cake. The two cakes, so different, now stand side by side, a symbol of two colliding worlds. "Kim Taehyung," he introduces himself simply, nodding to So-yoon. "Park So-yoon," she replies just as simply. Their gazes meet again. The awkwardness gradually begins to dissipate, giving way to a strange new feeling. They are both celebrating their birthdays. They both felt lonely today. And now they are standing in the same room, their birthdays unexpectedly intertwined in the most bizarre way. The holiday none of them wanted is now beginning. Forced, awkward, surreal. But it's beginning. And perhaps that's exactly how it was meant to be. An awkward silence falls over the small living room. 3 people and 2 cakes, a pink unicorn and a homemade chocolate one. They sit side by side on the table, like 2 different worlds that have unexpectedly collided. Ji-won is the first to break the silence. "So, maybe we should try some cake?" she suggests, too loudly and cheerfully. She's still nervous. So-yoon nods silently. She's still trying to process what's happening. She goes to the kitchen for a knife and plates. Her movements are automatic. Taehyung remains standing in the middle of the room. He feels out of place. His gaze glides over the cozy details, the photographs on the shelf, the soft blanket on the sofa, the book lying on the table. There's so much life here, so much warmth. Not at all like his sterile penthouse. So-yoon returns and sets the plates on the table. She picks up a knife and looks at the 2 cakes. "Which one should we start with?" she asks, hesitant to take the initiative. "From yours," Taehyung says, surprising himself. His voice is still quiet. "It smells... real." Se-yoon blushes slightly. She cuts a large piece of her chocolate cake and places it on a plate. She hands it to Taehyung. Their fingers barely touch. He takes the plate. He doesn't usually eat sweets. There's no room in his life for such simple pleasures. but now he feels obligated. Out of politeness, he breaks off a small piece with his fork and brings it to his mouth. The chocolate flavor is rich and not too sweet. The cake is moist and soft. It's nice. Unexpectedly nice. He chews slowly and nods. Delicious, he says shortly. Thank you. His response is terse and reserved, but Seo-yoon can see that it's sincere. The corners of her lips involuntarily lift in a slight, barely noticeable smile. There's something touching in his restraint. Ji-won, seeing this micro-smile, can't help but smile herself. She cuts off a huge slice of pink cake and stuffs her face. Oh, mine's pretty good too, she says, her mouth full, trying to lighten the mood again. Now everyone's eating cake. The awkwardness gradually begins to melt away, like chocolate in your mouth. The silence no longer seems so oppressive. Ji-won quickly eats her piece and suddenly slaps her forehead in mock horror. Oh, I completely forgot. I urgently need to call my boyfriend. He's probably worried. She casts a pleading glance at Seo-yoon, mixed with a secret wink. You two can handle the cakes without me. I won't be long. Without waiting for an answer, she grabs her purse and slips out the door, leaving Taehyung and Seo-yoon alone. The door closes, and the apartment becomes quiet again. This time, the silence is different. Not lonely, but a little tense. Seo-yoon sighs. She understands her friend's maneuver. I'm sorry about her, she says, looking at the door. She's always so impulsive. But she was loyal, Taehyung notes. She really wanted to correct her mistake. Seo-yoon nods. She approaches the table and begins collecting empty plates. Perhaps some tea? She suggests. She needs something to do with her hands. Taehyung watches her walk around the kitchen, making tea. Her movements are calm and graceful. He's not used to being a guest in someone's home. Usually, he's the one who welcomes people into his own space, where everything is under control. Yes, he agrees. Tea would be welcome. He goes to the window and looks out at the city at night. From here, the view is different, closer and simpler. He sees lights in the windows of other houses, people walking down the street. Ordinary life. Seo-yoon places 2 cups of fragrant tea on the table. So you're a businessman? She asks cautiously, sitting down on the sofa. Taehyung turns around. He pauses for a second. Yeah, he says, coming back and sitting in the chair opposite. Something like that. It's not exactly a lie. He does run a business. It's just a different kind of business. He takes a sip of tea. It's hot and warming. Are you a designer? He asks, remembering what he saw on her page. Seo-yoon perks up. Yes, I'm a freelancer. I design logos, business cards, and sometimes websites. She talks about her work, the challenges of finding clients, and the joy when a project is successful. She talks, and he listens. He truly listens, without interrupting. Then she falls silent and stares into her cup. Sometimes it's hard, she admits quietly. You sit alone all day within 4 walls, no one to talk to. It feels like the whole world is out there, and you're here, alone. He looks at her. He understands every word she says. He, too, often feels lonely in his large penthouse, despite the people around him. I understand, he says, and for the first time, there's something akin to warmth in his voice. They look at each other. The gaze lingers a little too long. Something new hangs in the air. Understanding. Suddenly, a loud, inaudible scream comes from outside the window. Then another. Rough voices, arguing and swearing can be heard. Drunken neighbors have clearly started a fight right under the windows. Seo-yoon flinches and involuntarily cringes. It happens often, but she can never get used to it. Taehyung's reaction is instant. He stands. One quick, smooth step, and he's between her and the window. His back is straight, his shoulders squared. He doesn't completely block her, but his posture is unmistakably protective. He's a shield. He doesn't even look at her. His gaze is fixed on the door, his eyes hard, cold, focused. His entire being is transformed in an instant. From a reserved conversationalist, he turns into a predator, ready for action. He doesn't say a word. He simply casts a brief, sharp glance toward the half-open door into the hallway. So-yoon notices this look. She sees more than just irritation in his eyes. She sees absolute, unconditional authority in them. And a silent command. And this order is immediately executed. The noise outside the window suddenly stops. Quick, heavy footsteps are heard on the asphalt, followed by a muffled grunt that immediately fades. Then, complete silence. A silence that comes too quickly and unnaturally, as if someone had simply turned off the sound. Taehyung stands before her for a few more seconds, listening. Satisfied that the threat has passed, he slowly turns to face her. His features soften again, but a trace of that harshness still lingers in his eyes. "Everything is calm," he says simply. So-yoon looks at him wide-eyed. She understands. This is no accident. His men, those stern men in suits standing in her hallway, had just calmed the troublemakers in a matter of seconds, on his silent command. For the first time that evening, she truly understands who stands before her. This isn't just a businessman. This is a man with real power and authority, a man accustomed to being obeyed without a word. But instead of fear, she feels something else, something deep and primal, a sense of security. The feeling that with him by her side, nothing can harm her. It's a dangerous, deceptive feeling, but so powerful that it takes her breath away. "Thank you," she breathes out quietly. He glances briefly at her still pale face. Something in his eyes that could be mistaken for concern flickers. "They won't bother you again," he says. And it sounds like a promise, like a statement of fact. After this incident, the atmosphere changes again. Taehyung looks at his watch. He realizes it's already very late. He's been sitting too late. This shouldn't have happened. "I have to go," he says, standing up. So-yoon also stands up. For some reason, she feels a little sad. This strange, chaotic evening is coming to an end, and she doesn't want it to end. "Yes, of course, it's too late." He puts on his coat. He looks once again like the unapproachable stranger who appeared on her doorstep. But now she knows there's more beneath that stern exterior. He approaches the door and opens it. His guards are still standing in the hallway, motionless and silent. The marbles in their hands still look ridiculous. Taehyung steps out into the hallway and turns to face her. "I'll walk you home," he says. It's not a question. It's that confident statement again. So-yoon looks at him in surprise. "But I'm home." "To my door," he clarifies. "You know where I live." She nods, still not understanding, but she puts on her slippers and goes out into the hallway, closing the door behind her. They walk along the night streets. The distance between their houses is truly short, just one turn. His guards follow them at a respectful distance, disappearing into the shadows. They walk in silence. The night air is cool and fresh. The city is asleep. Only their footsteps echo in the silence. They approach his house. It's a modern, austere building, a stark contrast to her cozy old home. He stops at the entrance. "Thank you for an extraordinary birthday," he says. There's a slight hesitation in his voice, as if he's choosing his words. This is unusual for him. Seo-yoon looks at him and smiles. This time her smile is wide and genuine. "You too! Happy birthday, Kim Taehyung!" They stand facing each other for a few seconds. Two birthday boys, two lonely people whose paths crossed in the most unlikely way. He nods, turns, and walks into the entrance. The door closes behind him. Seo-yoon stands there for a few more seconds, staring at the closed door. Then she slowly turns and walks home. His voice echoes in her head. His image lingers before her eyes, stern, yet somehow vulnerable. And the moment when he stood up to protect her. She walks into her empty apartment, but now she doesn't feel lonely. Now she feels something new, something that makes her heart beat a little faster. Her birthday, which had begun so sadly, ended completely unexpectedly. And perhaps that was only the beginning. Sunlight filtered through the cracks in the curtains, gently touching Seo-yoon's face. She slowly opened her eyes, feeling a little disoriented. She had tossed and turned for a long time last night before she was able to fall asleep. And when she finally did, her dreams were filled with strange, vivid images. pink unicorns, stern men with balloons, and dark, piercing eyes that seemed to see right through her. She lay motionless, trying to separate the dream from reality. The entire evening had seemed so unreal, so phantasmagorical, that her brain refused to believe it was real. It had to be a dream, a plausible, detailed one, but a dream nonetheless. She stretched and sat up in bed. Her gaze fell on the cardigan, still thrown over the chair. There were no traces of confetti from Jiwon's party poppers on the floor. She stood slowly and walked into the living room. The room was clean. She'd cleaned it herself before bed. No obvious evidence of yesterday's chaos. Her heart sank with a strange disappointment. So it really had been a dream, so vivid and then her gaze fell on the coffee table. In the center of the table, neatly placed, stood a cardboard cake box, her chocolate cake, but now it was empty. Next to it stood another, slightly smaller box, made of dark, matte cardboard, with a simple logo. She walked closer. It was from a very expensive tea shop, the very one she often passed but never went into. She carefully opened the lid. Inside, neatly wrapped in individual rice paper bags, lay tea balls. They smelled of jasmine and something else, subtle and exquisite. This wasn't the tea she'd drunk yesterday. This was new, clearly purchased that morning, and then she saw it. A napkin, a simple paper napkin, neatly folded into a square and placed next to the box. There was something written on it. Seoyun's heart began to beat faster. She reached out and took the napkin. The paper was soft, almost silky. She unfolded it. Written on the napkin in a confident, clear, slightly angular handwriting was a phone number, just numbers, no name, no signature. But she recognized the handwriting immediately. It matched the man who left it perfectly. Decisive, direct, uncompromising. It was not a dream. It all really happened. Jiwon got the wrong address. She showed up at the door with this menacing stranger. They ate cake, they talked. He protected her. He walked her home, or rather, to his home. And he was here this morning, while she was sleeping. Thoughts raced through her head like an avalanche. How did he get in? Her door was locked. Then she remembered his men, their lightning-fast reactions. Of course, for a man who could silence drunken rowdies with a glance, a simple lock on the door was no problem. But he didn't break in. He didn't wake her. He simply walked in. Left it. Some kind of apology? Gratitude? A sign that he too remembered? She looked at the number again. Simple black digits on a white napkin. They seemed like a portal to another world, his world, a world full of danger, power, and authority, which had briefly touched her quiet, safe existence last night. She carefully placed the napkin back on the table, as if it were a fragile relic. Then she picked up the box of tea. It smelled incredible. It was a gesture. Modest, as he said, but made with the same confidence and attention to detail she sensed in him. He hadn't just sent someone to buy the first tea they came across. He had chosen it. For her. Seoyun felt like she was in a daze all day. She tried to work, opened her graphics editor, but her fingers wouldn't obey. Her gaze kept drifting to the dark box on the desk and the small white square next to it. She thought about him, about Kim Tae-hyung, about how his stern demeanor contrasted with the awkward moments when he held that ridiculous cake or tasted her chocolate one. She remembered how he stood between her and the window, how his back momentarily became a wall, separating her from the chaos outside, how his eyes changed, becoming hard and commanding, and how the noise outside instantly stopped. Was she afraid? Perhaps so. But what struck her most was the feeling of security he gave her in that moment. It was primal, almost animalistic, and it was dangerously alluring. Now she had a key, a simple phone number. What was she going to do with it? Call it? Text it? What was she going to say? "Hi, is this the girl you visited yesterday with the unicorn cake?" She sighed and stared at the monitor again, not seeing him. The world had returned to its usual calm, but something in it had irrevocably changed. Kim Tae-hyung now existed in it. The whole day passed, and Seoyun still couldn't find the courage to touch the napkin. She moved the tea box, wiped the table, but avoided the napkin, as if it were charged with electricity. Evening had fallen. The sky outside had darkened again, and the city's lights had come on. She sat on the couch, wrapped in that same blanket, looking at the phone lying on the pillow next to her. It was black and silent. She imagined his day. What had it been like? He'd returned to his sterile penthouse, to his security, to his affairs, which she didn't want to think about. Perhaps he'd already forgotten about yesterday's misunderstanding. Perhaps this tea in this room were just a formality, a polite gesture, not intended to continue. But then why did he leave a number? Why not just tea? The tea said, "Sorry to bother you." The number said, "Perhaps we'll see each other again." Her fingers reached for her phone. She picked it up. The screen lit up brightly, demanding a password. She unlocked it and opened the messaging app. An empty chat. A new conversation. She looked at the napkin again. The confident numbers seemed to encourage her. His handwriting didn't look hesitant. "Just say thank you," she whispered to herself. "That's all. Whether he responds or not is up to him." She took a deep breath, as if about to dive into cold water, and began entering the number. Each digit clicked loudly in the quiet apartment. A new contact appeared on the screen. She didn't enter a name. She simply entered the number. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. What should she write? The phrases she'd thought up beforehand now seemed stupid and contrived. She closed her eyes for a second, letting her emotions take over, and began typing. Simple. Sincere. "Thank you for the tea." She stopped. This wasn't enough. Too formal. She had to say more. She had to say what she really felt. And, "Thanks for saving my birthday." She reread the message. It was simple, but it held all the truth. He really had saved him. From loneliness, from tears, from disappointment. He had turned it from the saddest day of the year into the most unforgettable. She didn't give herself time to change her mind. Quickly, before she chickened out, she hit the send button. The message was sent. And now the hardest part began, the waiting. She placed the phone back on the pillow and stood up to make herself some tea. The same one he'd given her. She needed something to occupy herself. She opened one of the elegant tea bags, dropped a scoop of tea into a cup, and poured hot water over it. The scoop slowly began to open like a flower, filling the kitchen with the exquisite scent of jasmine. She waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. The phone was silent. Disappointment began to slowly creep up on her. What had she thought? That the head of the Mafia, a man obviously very busy and important, would sit and wait for her message? Maybe this number was actually a working one, and one of his subordinates was checking it? Maybe he was just being polite and didn't want to offend her, but wasn't really interested. She had almost convinced herself of this when the phone on the pillow suddenly vibrated and made a short but loud in the silence notification sound. So-yoon's heart leaped and sank. She nearly spilled her hot tea. Slowly, almost afraid to breathe, she walked to the sofa and picked up the phone in her trembling hands. The screen lit up. One new message. From that same number. She tapped the notification. The chat opened. Below her message was a reply, short, like his manner of speaking. She read it. And then she read it again, not believing her eyes. "I should be thanking you. It was my first birthday without being lonely." She sat down on the sofa, clutching the phone to her chest. Her eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of a different kind. Not the bitter tears of loneliness, but warm, aching tears of understanding. He felt the same burden, the same emptiness. And last night, as unexpected and surreal for him as it had been for her, gave him the same relief. They were on opposite sides of the fence. He, a mafia boss in his world of power and danger, and she, a simple designer in her world of silence and creativity. But they were alike in one thing, their loneliness. And yesterday, by chance and Ji-won's stupid mistake, they shared that loneliness for a few hours, and it stopped being so hard. She looked at his message. Just one sentence. But it was a confession, an admission of vulnerability that she was sure he'd never made to almost anyone. She slid her finger carefully across the screen, he said. A first birthday without loneliness. And she felt the same way. She picked up the phone again and started typing, this time without fear, with a sense of a new, nascent connection. "Me too." After that first message, a fragile, silent agreement developed between them. They didn't text each other every day. Their communications were rare, but meaningful. A simple, "How are you?" from him in the evening, and a sincere reply from her, "Tired, but work is progressing." Or a photo of her new design from her, and a short "good" from him. But their worlds, separated by one street, began to inexplicably come closer together. One day, So-yoon was lingering over a project at her favorite coffee shop on their shared street. It was late, and the owner was starting to put chairs on the tables, hinting that it was time to close. She looked longingly at her laptop. The work wasn't finished yet. She gathered her things, put on her jacket, and stepped out into the cool night street. Just a few steps later, she ran into him. Taehyung walked towards them, his hands in his coat pockets, and one of his men followed him at a respectful distance. "So-yoon-si," he said, stopping. His face was illuminated by the neon lights of the signs, and there was not a hint of surprise in his eyes. "Taehyung-si," she replied, her heart giving a small jump. "You are so late?" "Business meetings," he replied curtly, shrugging. His gaze slid to her laptop. "Are you working late? Do you need a walk home?" It was so natural that she wasn't even surprised. They walked together down the night street. His bodyguard walked behind, disappearing into the shadows. They didn't talk about anything important, about the weather, about how the coffee at this coffee shop had gotten worse. But in the silence that hung between their rare phrases, there was something comfortable, something warm. A week later, Seo-yoon went to the supermarket to buy groceries. Having bought more than she planned, she struggled to lug 2 heavy bags, stopping every few meters to catch her breath. She was already scolding herself for her impracticality when a young man in simple sportswear approached her. "Let me help you," he said politely, and without waiting for an answer, he deftly picked up both bags. He was incredibly strong and moved with a graceful confidence that seemed familiar to her. "Thank you, but I can do it myself," she began. "Don't worry," he smiled, and his smile was open and welcoming. He walked her all the way to the entrance, lifted her bags to her door, nodded politely, and left before she could properly thank him. That evening, she received a message from Taehyung. "Did you help with the bags?" She smiled, understanding. This was his man, but he wasn't wearing his usual formal suit, his stony expression. He was in civilian clothes, like a true secret agent, and in this gesture, she saw not only concern, but also his desire not to frighten her, not to intrude into her space with all his menacing reality. "Yes," she replied. "A very polite young man. Thank him." "Already," came the almost instantaneous answer. These chance encounters continued. She'd see his car slowly driving past the park where she sometimes strolled, or he'd, coincidentally, find himself in the same bookstore while she was choosing a new book for inspiration. Each encounter was brief, almost fleeting. A few words exchanged, a glance that lingered just a little too long, a slight, barely noticeable smile on his usually stern face. They didn't do anything that looked like a date, but an understanding grew between them, a quiet, gradual attraction between two people who found in each other a reflection of their loneliness and an unexpected cure for it. He never pressured her. He didn't demand her time. His presence in her life was unobtrusive but constant, like a quiet guardian watching over her from a safe distance. And in this unobtrusiveness, there was such confidence, such strength, that she began to feel safe not only physically, but emotionally. With him, even just knowing he was somewhere nearby, her world, usually so fragile, seemed to acquire an invisible yet strong steel frame. A few weeks had passed since that strange birthday. One evening, So-yoon's phone rang. Vibrated. His name was flashing on the screen. "Can you spare me some time this evening?" the message read. Her heart began to beat faster again. This wasn't accidental or in passing. It was a direct invitation. "Yes," she answered without hesitation. "Of course. I'll be waiting for you at your house at 8. At precisely 8 o'clock, his car, dark and inconspicuous, pulled up outside her house. He was behind the wheel. No chauffeurs, no bodyguards in the car. He got out to open the door for her. Dressed in dark trousers and a simple black turtleneck, he looked less formal, but no less imposing. He didn't take her to a fancy restaurant with a view of the city. They went to a quiet, almost empty restaurant in the old quarter, tucked away in a courtyard. Inside, it smelled of wood and herbs. A fireplace glowed, and their secluded table sat in soft semi-darkness. They had dinner. They talked about simple things, about the books she loved, about the music he listened to in the car. He avoided talking about work, and she didn't ask. It felt like they were both enjoying this illusion of normal life, this ordinary date. When dinner was over, and they were sitting with their tea almost finished, Taehyung put his cup down and looked at her. Really looked. The light from the fireplace played in his dark eyes, making them less inscrutable. "Soyun-si," he began, his voice quiet but very clear. "You know, my life, it's not like others." He paused, collecting his thoughts, choosing his words, which was not easy for him. "It's dangerous. It's complicated. There are things I can't tell you about, and people I'd rather not encounter. There's no room for accidents." He looked at the flames in the fireplace, then back at her. "I've always understood that, and I've always accepted it." Seo-yoon remained silent, letting him speak. She could see how difficult it was for him. "But then, that night you showed up on my doorstep with that stupid pink cake." A hint of a smile flickered across his lips. "And something broke inside me." He exhaled and looked straight into her eyes, and there was nothing in his gaze but pure naked truth. "After that evening, I realized one thing. The greatest danger for me now is not the bullets of competitors or the betrayal of subordinates. The greatest danger is never seeing your smile again." He spoke these words without pathos, simply as a statement of fact, as the most important truth that he had discovered for himself. He paused, as if giving her time to process what he'd said. Then, slowly, almost hesitantly, he extended his hand across the table, palm up. An expectant, open gesture. So-yoon looked at his hand. Strong, long-fingered, the hand of a man accustomed to wielding power. And then she looked into his eyes. And she saw in them not a mafia boss, not a dangerous stranger, but the same lonely man who stood by the window on his birthday. The man who tasted her chocolate cake and said a dry "thank you." The man who stood between her and danger without a second thought. She didn't hesitate. She didn't analyze the risks or consider how crazy this action was. Her heart had already made its choice. She gently placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around her palm. His hand was warm and firm. There was not only strength in that touch, but also a promise. A promise to protect, to cherish, and, most importantly, to never let her feel alone again. They sat there, not speaking. Their hands were intertwined on the table, between 2 cups of cold tea. The fire in the fireplace crackled, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Their worlds, so different. One of power, silence, and danger, and another of color, creativity, and simple joys. Separated by just one street, finally didn't just collide. They intertwined. Fingers intertwined. Gazes met in complete understanding, and 2 lonely hearts began to beat in unison. They both knew the road ahead would not be easy. But that evening, in the quiet light of the fireplace, holding hands, they knew something else, that this was only the beginning. And that beginning was worth all the risks the future held. They drove from the restaurant to her house in silence. But it wasn't an awkward silence, but a quiet, understanding one. His right hand rested on the gear shift, his left still holding hers tightly, as if afraid that if he let go, she would disappear. He walked her all the way to the door. They stood under the dim light of the lamp in her entryway. I need to go away for a few days," he said, looking somewhere over her shoulder. "Business. Not far." It was a warning, and an admission at the same time, an admission that his world existed, that it required his attention, and that it could be dangerous. "Be careful," she breathed quietly, and those weren't just words. They held the fear she now wanted to feel. He nodded, his gaze finally meeting hers. "Her? I'm always careful." He paused. "Now I have someone to be careful for." He didn't try to kiss her. There was no theatrics. He simply raised her hand to his lips and briefly touched her knuckles. The gesture was old-fashioned, almost chivalrous, and all the more sincere for it. Then he released his fingers, slowly, as if reluctantly, turned and walked away. So-yoon entered the apartment, leaned against the closed door, and pressed her hand to her chest. The touch of his lips still burned on her skin. Several days passed in a strange anticipation. She didn't write to him, sensing he needed space. But he wrote to her the next evening, briefly, "Everything's fine," and she was able to breathe a sigh of relief. His return was marked by another accidental visit to her coffee shop. He walked in, saw her at the table, and something in his posture instantly changed. His shoulders straightened, his hard features softened. He walked over and sat down across from her without asking permission. "How's the project going?" he asked, looking at her laptop. "It's stuck," she sighed. He stared at the screen, at her logo design for the flower shop. "Too many details," he said suddenly. "It needs to be simple, so they'll remember it at first glance." She raised her eyebrows in surprise. There was a stern, businesslike logic to his words, and she was right. She removed a few elements, simplified the lines. "Better," he stated, and approval flashed in his eyes. In that moment, she realized their worlds weren't so far apart. He was a strategist, and she, in her work too, sought a strategy: how to convey an idea to the viewer's heart. The idyll didn't last long. One day, as she was returning from Jiwon's, a strange, expensive, but garishly flashy car was parked outside her front door. Next to it, leaning against the door, was a young man in a suit, smoking. A man who screamed money, but not taste. Seeing her, he threw down his cigarette and walked towards her. "Park Seo-yoon?" His smile was sweet, but his eyes remained cold. Instinctively, she took a step back. "Who are you?" "Taehyung's colleague," he said, looking her up and down. "My name is Chan. I need to talk to you about your new friend." At that moment, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was the same polite young man who had helped her with her bags. He approached so quietly that Chan flinched. "The girl doesn't want to talk," the guard said softly, but without allowing for argument. His posture was relaxed, but there was a hint of a readiness to explode. Chan snorted, his sweet smile fading. "Tell Taehyung that old friends miss him, and that new toys tend to break." He gave Seo-yoon one last disparaging glance, got into the car, and drove away. Seo-yoon stood trembling. This wasn't a drunken brawler. This was a genuine threat, coming from his world. That evening, when Taehyung arrived at her place, his face was carved from stone. He stood in the middle of her living room, the air around him literally crackling with suppressed rage. "Did he touch you?" His voice was low and dangerous. "No." "Your man was nearby." He closed his eyes for a second, and she saw the tension in his jaw. "I'm sorry, this shouldn't have happened to you." "Who is he?" "The past," he answered shortly, "which doesn't want to become the past." He walked to the window, pulled back the curtain, and looked out onto the street. "He wanted to provoke me, to use you as a weakness." "And me?" she asked quietly. "Am I your weakness?" He turned to her, his eyes glowing in the dim light. "No, you are my safe haven, and a safe haven must be protected, at any cost." There was no romance in his words. There was steel and promise. And in that moment, she realized she was ready to accept this part of him too, his rage, his willingness to be cruel, because it was aimed at protecting the fragile bridge they had built between their worlds. The conflict with Chan seemed to have subsided. Taehyung didn't give details, but the tension in his shoulders gradually eased. One Saturday morning, while she was making coffee, there was a knock on her door. She opened it and saw him. He was wearing simple jeans and a dark t-shirt, and he looked younger. Tired, but younger. In his hands, he held 2 paper bags that smelled of freshly baked goods. "I didn't get enough sleep," he said simply, "and I didn't want to be alone. May I?" He stepped inside, and her small apartment filled with his presence. He was like a large wild animal, awkwardly nestled in an unusually cramped but safe lair. They were having breakfast. He was eating a tiny croissant with his large hands, and she couldn't take her eyes off the sight. He was vulnerable. Real. He watched her draw in her sketchbook and asked questions. "Why is this line there? What does this color mean?" Then he fell asleep, right on her couch, sprawled out, taking up all the space. His breathing was even and deep. She covered him with her blanket and sat next to him, simply looking at him. At his relaxed face, at the dark eyelashes resting on his cheeks, at the scar at his temple, the origin of which she was afraid to ask. At that moment, there was no Mafia, no designer. There was just him and her. And a quiet morning filled with the scent of coffee and a trust that was worth more than words. He woke up an hour later. He blinked, saw her, and there was no camouflage or protection in his eyes. Only peace. "I haven't slept like this in a long time," he muttered hoarsely. She smiled. "So you'll come again?" He reached out and touched her hand. Yes. It was the simplest and most important promise. He would come again. Their worlds continued to draw closer, one morning after another. And both understood there was no turning back, and they weren't looking for it. A year had passed. Exactly 1 year since Seoyun's world had been turned upside down by a mistaken address. She sat in her living room, buried in sketches for a major new commission, a project she'd previously only dreamed of. Rain fell outside, turning the evening into a cozy, lulling cacophony of raindrops tapping on the glass. The door opened without knocking. Taehyung walked in. He was shaking drops of water from his coat, his face wearing the familiar weariness of a long day. But as soon as his gaze fell on her, the weariness softened, giving way to something deep and calm. "I'm home," he said simply, and those 2 words meant more to her than any confession. He hung up his coat and walked over to the sofa, sitting down next to her. He didn't ask how her day had been. He simply put his arm around her shoulders and looked at the drawings scattered around her. "Can you make it?" he asked, his chin touching her temple. "With your silent approval, yes," she smiled, closing her eyes, savoring his closeness. He had become her safe haven, just as he had promised. A place where she could simply be herself, creative, sometimes absent-minded, sometimes insecure. Seoyun. His world no longer knocked on her door with threats. The incident with Chan was the final spasm of a fading past. Taehyung had resolutely and methodically shielded her from all storms, leaving behind only the slightest ripples that reached her in the form of his rare, tense calls or brief absences. But he always returned. Always. He no longer lived in his sterile penthouse. One day, a few months into their new beginning, he simply moved his things into her small apartment. No discussion. He simply brought a few of his formal suits into the closet, placed his collection of expensive teas on the shelf next to her fragrant herbal blends, and placed his toothbrush in a glass next to her pink one. It wasn't an invasion. It was a homecoming. Now their street wasn't a boundary, but the center of their universe. He knew all the baristas at her coffee shop, and they knew how much he loved his espresso. She knew exactly where in the park he preferred to think about his business. Their lives intertwined in a mundane, everyday pattern that was more precious to them both than any passion. "Do you know what I'm thinking?" she said quietly, looking at the rain outside the window. "That it's time for this rain to end?" he suggested, his voice lazy and relaxed. "No, I'm thinking about that day, about that pink cake, about your face when you opened the door." He chuckled softly, a sound that still made her heart flutter. "I was furious. I thought it was some kind of elaborate torture. And it turned out to be the best day of my life," he concluded, and there was not a trace of irony in his voice. He was completely serious. He took her hand and intertwined his fingers with hers. The scar on his knuckle brushed against her skin, a reminder of battles she hadn't seen. But now it was a part of him, one she accepted unconditionally. "I never told you, but I'm grateful for that mistake," she said. "Grateful that Jiwon got the address wrong. Grateful that your address was exactly your address." He turned her face towards him. His dark eyes were serious. "And I'm grateful to that lonely man who stood by the window that day, and to that girl who wasn't afraid of him when he showed up at the door with her cake. She saw him not as a monster, but as a human being." They sat in silence, listening to the rain, 2 lonely hearts, finding each other in the most unexpected place. His world was no longer alien and frightening to her. It was simply his world, one she had chosen to be a part of. And her world, A world of creativity, simple joys, and warmth became his refuge, his true home. Taehyung hugged her tighter. Good night, Soyoon. Ah. Good night, Taehyung. Outside, the rain gradually subsided. Peace now reigned on their street, which had once separated two lonely places. And they knew that no matter what storms lay ahead, they would face them together. Because their story had begun with a mistake, but continued with the will of the heart. And that is the most solid foundation for happiness that can be found in this imperfect world.